Hello and welcome to another edition of our Magpie Circle YouTube live show, and we're joined by the main presenter and face of the National League, Premier League, Football League, you name it. He must be about one of the busiest men on television. I see more of you, Matt, on my television screen in my big room than I do the rest of the family, to be honest. Thank you very much for taking time out of a very busy schedule and joining us.
Well, it's a pleasure, Paul, and it's very nice to join you on the Magpie Circle. I would worry about being the face of anything, frankly, but it's certainly it's a busy season, and I'm enjoying it, even though obviously it's not perfect and far from it. In fact, for a lot of clubs financially, as I'm sure we'll get our teeth into. But yeah, it's nice to be busy. It's nice, particularly for anybody, including me at the moment, to be out and about and get into games. It's a rare privilege.
So one of the reasons we don't need many, but to get you on, is that you'll be paying another visit to Meadow Lane on Saturday against Wrexham, won't you?
Well, I think it's at the racecourse, if memory serves. I think I've got written down that it's at Wrexham, so I hope that's not wrong in my diary. One of us has got the wrong.
Well, I think I've probably got brain failure, to be honest. Apologies for that. Yeah, what do I know? Let's put it this way: you'll be presenting from the ground where Notts County are playing.
This is true. Yes, we will be definitely there with Neil and your team up against Dean Keats and Wrexham. Obviously, just about now formally taken over by the two Hollywood stars, Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds. So, yeah, just about the perfect time to be doing two of the giants of non-league football.
Hey, I just wish we were a small fish in the Football League rather than a giant of non-league football.
I understand.
I mean, all joking aside, you are a very, very busy man. I don't know of anyone else in the media who, on one night is covering Champions League and the next is all stations from Eastleigh to Dover, you name it, you're there, aren't you?
I am. And as I say, it's nice to be out and about and going to games, that's for sure. For the last 9 months or so, it's been a rare treat. Certainly at one point, you may well remember, and it wouldn't have been more than maybe a season or two ago, I was thinking about the map of the National League, and it was Barrow in the northwest, to Gateshead in the northeast, to Dover in the southeast, to Torquay in the southwest. I mean, it doesn't get much more of a full spread than that. Now, obviously, we've lost a couple of those to the division below or the division above in the case of Barrow, and that's, I'm sure, where Notts County want to be as soon as possible. But of course, we'll hold on to you as long as we can, from a selfish point of view, because it's nice to have a good manager and a good team to follow. And a few clubs have gone before you, dropped in, fought like Wrexham, and eventually re-emerged into the light.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, getting to Barrow, I mean, I went on the train, but that's a difficult trip. It's something about my 132nd ground I've seen Notts on. And
Wow.
I think that probably is one of the most inaccessible parts of the country.
Yes, you come off, I normally obviously drive, you come off the M6 and you think you're kind of nearly there, but then you go for the first time and it's about another hour. You think you're almost in Iceland by the time you get there. But yeah, they obviously toiled and eventually found the right formula with Ian Evert, he's gone on to Bolton now, but suddenly found a brand of football at work last season. And yeah, it was a bit controversial, and obviously they went up on that points per game basis, but I'm not sure what other solution would have satisfied everybody. So that's the way it finished, really. Obviously, you may have had different ideas, I'm sure.
I don't think anyone could have any complaints about Barrow not going up next year automatically. Stephen Orton's just dropped in on us. We get some live questions as well. And this kind of leads on to, and we don't want to put you into an invidious position given BT Sports' contract with the National League. He's mentioning, in terms of what's happening with the National League, the Dover chairman resigned over the weekend. What's your take on what's going on with the National League? Can you gaze into your crystal ball? How do you see all this panning out?
Well, it's a mess. That's, I think, something we can all agree on. And there isn't much that everybody will agree on, but I think we can agree on that. Clearly, back in the autumn, when the league hadn't started and there was much uncertainty about whether it would start, the clubs and the league sought assurances from government and were given an assurance, as I understand it, at that time, obviously funding, a pot of around £11 million to see them through to Christmas, and everybody agreed on that. Now, obviously, then there were wrangles, and there still are wrangles about how that was divvied up. Some of the bigger clubs felt they didn't get enough. Some of the smaller clubs never feel like they get enough, and so on and so on. You're probably never going to win that argument to everybody's satisfaction. And then somehow, nobody nailed down what was to happen should the clubs obviously be shorn of fans and in need of further support, which they are, after Christmas. And it transpired in the last few weeks that the government had only ever intended further payments to be loans rather than grants. The clubs, and I can only assume the National League, didn't nail this matter down back in the autumn, unbelievably, really. Obviously, we now have a departed chief executive, so it's no longer his direct responsibility. The National League board is a moving cast list, as you say. The Dover chairman, who I think was on the board, Jim Parmenter, has resigned. And we're dancing round and round in circles. We're now obviously in the midst of this vote, which I can only think might drag on for at least another week or two, because some clubs rightly want assurances or want to apply to Sport England for grants and to find out what the outcome of that application will be before they're prepared to vote. So it's going to drag on a bit, and there are 66 clubs across the three divisions. But my guess would be, in all this mess, that the National League Premier, if you will vote certainly majority, and I would presume big majority, to play on, because so many of them are still in with a shout at the playoffs, even if you're just acting in self-interest, and that's fair enough. I think in North and South, it's probably less cut and dried, and it may be, which would be a real headache, that one of those two divisions votes to play on and the other doesn't, and I'm not quite sure how the tier operates if that happens.
It's very interesting, and I'm sure Notts fans listening now will be very encouraged that it's, a little bit in the know. Your take that the national division, to call it that, will carry on. BT have a contract with the National League. I mean, I've not seen anything, but I think one of the big challenges is a lack of transparency in the way they're going about this process and communicating. And so clubs are coming out on individual agendas. But have you, as a sports organisation with a contract with them, have there been any sort of interviews, sit-downs with a Brian Barwick or Mark Ives, the new chief exec, to try and establish what is going on?
No, not to my knowledge. And obviously that would be a little bit, at the contractual level, that would be obviously above my station. That would be between the powers that be at BT Sport and those, as you say, that sit in control of the National League and its board. I think it obviously will be in BT's interest, such as they have one, to show the games. It's a product, obviously, we've signed up to show another 3 years of after this one. We're loyal supporters of it, and I think it provides a service that a lot of fans, obviously, particularly when they can't go to games, really enjoy and are thankful to have. So I can't fix this, obviously, that's for sure, and I'm not sure who can at the moment. What I do know from the weekend when I was at Stockport, I did hear from folks involved directly at the weekend that the DCMS, the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, has now underwritten a lateral flow testing. So they will pay for testing for all players at National League level from, I think it is a week today. So from next week, as we sit here now. Now, that would effectively mean that on health grounds, clubs shouldn't have an obstacle or an objection to carry on. It will there be simply financial. So that removes one of the barriers to clubs, understandably being reluctant in some cases to play on. The financial one is a bit of a hornet's nest. And clearly, I do understand that clubs, in the end, must look after their own interests, because who else will? If they don't think about themselves, then it's all right saying, well, they should think about everybody else. They should think about the greater good. But they are mostly those that are sitting on boards or supporters' trusts, whatever it might be. They are almost on a bound, really, if not legally bound, to look after their club, not the bigger interest of the league or the interests of another club. So they must act as they see fit. And that will diverge from those that really are desperate to play on. And I'm sure County are in that bracket, well-funded, well-supported, desperate to make the playoffs or better, all the way down to clubs at the bottom of North and South who will have absolutely no interest, for obvious reasons, in playing on. Now, that's quite a circle to square. And as I say, it might not be the neatest of outcomes here, but it also can't drag on for the next month and more. I don't think it's in anybody's interest for it to rumble on and cause more and more disquiet and maybe discomfort.
Thank you. And there's some very useful points you've made. And as I say, I think a lot of Notts fans will take some comfort from your take that the main National League will carry on. So one night you're at the Champions League, another Saturday. And if you go, well, you're not going to Barrow this year, but I mean, there are some long trips. I don't know where fundamentally you travel out from. I remember earlier this year and felt a bit sorry for you. Eastleigh. When it rained, didn't it? And it rained. And it got called off, didn't it? Or abandoned?
It did at half time. Yeah, it was quite a struggle to get that game to go ahead. I think, in fact, I'm pretty certain that had there been supporters present, it would never have started, because obviously it's one thing for the pitch to be safe for the players. It's another for the approach and the surrounds and the actual inners of the ground to be safe for a number of people to be present, walking around, trying to buy food, etc. And often, even at much bigger grounds than Eastleigh, I've known games to be called off for public safety issues, really, and public transport and so on. So everybody tried their best to get the game on. Obviously, we all know, for lots of reasons that are mainly COVID-related, how some teams in the National League have fallen a long way behind others in terms of the number of games played. So the teams are desperate to fulfil every fixture that they can. And Eastleigh have had quite a lot of bad luck, really, in terms of opposition teams having outbreaks of COVID. So they were desperate to play the games. But and actually were probably the better team on the day. Than I think it was Hartlepool were down there. So they made a long trip, overnight stay, so expensive for Dave Challoner and his board. But in the end, it was obviously becoming a farce and unsafe. Players were slipping and sliding about, and it just wasn't possible to play on. But yeah, I was a drowned rat. But as I say, listen, if the worst is going to happen to you by going to all these games is that you get wet, then, and I've been wet, I think, at every game I can remember now for the last 2 months, if not cold and wet. But you know what? How many fans would swap shoes with me? And I'm well aware of that fact. They would be very much going through hell and high water to go and support their team. So I don't take that for granted, no, far from it.
I was going to ask you, because you've actually been to more Notts County games than any Notts County fan over the last, it will now be, when did lockdown come in, 10.5 to 11 months. What is it like? I mean, are you regularly COVID tested? I mean, how do you, are you in little bubbles at the ground? Are you stashed away in a room? What's it, set the scene for what it's actually like at National League presenting level?
Yeah, okay. And it obviously does vary. It varies from level to level, and it actually varies within those levels to some extent from club to club, because although there are guidelines, and you can imagine at a Premier League or a Champions League game, they are extremely strict, and there's lots of rules and so on and so forth, and there are zones, but all of that really does exist at National League level as well. So I think I could reassure the fans that everybody in the relevant zones has been tested to be safe to be in those zones. Now, I don't normally go into what's called a red zone, which is the players and coaches, so I maintain a safe distance from anyone who's directly involved in the games. That would be officials, coaches, and obviously players. If I do need a given game to go into that zone, then obviously I am tested, PCR tested, so I have the proper swab test. As a matter of course, we'll do a number of what they call lateral flow tests, the ones that you can self-administer, and we're temperature tested a number of times on the day of any given game. We have forms to fill in, obviously medical checks through BT Sport and so on. So it's pretty rigorous. And we all maintain, obviously, masks until or unless we're actually on air, those that are actually in vision. We maintain social distance at all times. So even on camera, myself and the pundit, or obviously if we have the manager nearby, or any interaction like that, that's all done over a safe distance with long boomed microphones and so on. And we stay outdoors as much as we physically can. Obviously, those that are there in small numbers in the TV trucks outside, they have to be inside the vehicles, but they're distanced inside. We will go inside only to probably use the loo or to pick up a cup of tea. And that would be a kind of, as you probably all know, everyone watching and yourself, Paul, from being a fan of football grounds, it's a kind of indoors-outdoors scenario. So it's not the inner workings of a club where the directors and playing and coaching staff would go. It's a neutral area where there'd be public toilets and possibly, hopefully, through the winter, a cup of tea. That's as good as it gets.
In terms of hospitality, and Steve Orton's got another question, which will be difficult for you to answer, but he's kind of, in a polite way, talking about disparity or difference in facilities, quality of stadium. Best, worst. I mean, it's a leading question about best stadium, I suspect. But I mean, presumably there is a huge discrepancy from somewhere like Notts County to some of the other clubs newly promoted, particularly into the National League main division.
Well, there is, obviously, just in terms of scale and size. So of the clubs that, I've covered in recent years, you think about, obviously, we're talking about Notts County, and they'll be very much in that top bracket with Wrexham, who've been in the National League now for a long time. Tranmere Rovers, obviously, in the last few seasons. Lincoln, the first year that I covered it, was a great story, obviously, with the Cowleys taking a pretty big club like Lincoln up into the EFL. So there's a number of teams like that are, obviously very much established and historic Football League clubs that have big and bold facilities. And then there are all the way down through the various, I'm sure, rungs to pretty small part-time clubs in one or two cases still. There are only probably one or two that are even remotely part-time in the national division of the National League, but there are one or two. And listen, I think they're just as welcoming, just as charming, just as hospitable in normal times, and indeed to the extent that they can be in COVID times. So I have to say, I've not gone anywhere and had a miserable experience or found it dirty or unloved, or because clubs don't actually really run like that, particularly at the lower levels. They are reliant on the love and support of the volunteers and the people that support that club. Yes, some of them work there, but that doesn't mean they don't love their club. And those that volunteer, for sure, are doing it absolutely from their heart rather than from their back pocket. So they put a lot of time and effort and probably their own money into making sure that club looks as good as it can. And I didn't really think about this until someone mentioned it recently, but obviously when we turn up with the cameras on a match day, there's an incentive for the club to look its best, and that comes from when they're allowed the players to get a haircut, or the chief exec to buy a new tie, or whatever it is. People, like they do for a wedding or a big day at work or whatever it is, they see it as an occasion and they make an effort accordingly. And I never thought of that, but obviously it makes sense, and good for them. You want the clubs to look their best. They're effectively selling themselves, aren't they, to their own fan base and, of course, to the wider audience watching on the telly.
You've obviously been involved with the National League for a while, and you mentioned the Cowleys at Lincoln when they were at Lincoln. Is there kind of a particular DNA or particular characteristics or strengths that you see in clubs that are promoted out of this league back into the Football League?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen different teams play different ways to achieve their goal. And when I think of, Lincoln in the first season that I covered it, go up under the Cowleys, it wasn't Route 1 football, but it was consistent, direct, competitive, combative, physical football. Danny worked and his team on fitness, on endurance and stamina, on a will to win. And he had key players in key positions. I think I would say from the years I've been covering it, where perhaps you could argue that at Premier League level, defences, by and large, win you titles. I think at National League level, if you haven't got a goal scorer or two, it's a problem. Really, you're going to get chances in games because with the best will in the world, the defences aren't clearly comparable to those at the very top of the game. So you will get chances in games, but you need a clinical goal scorer or two. And I think of obviously County, and you had Christian Dennis. He moved on, obviously got his chance to move up, but you've now got Kyle Wootton. There's a number of quality players at County, and you need one or two of them to stay fit. So you need a bit of luck. Obviously, had a bit of a lack of that with Callum Roberts, for instance, in recent weeks. He's a big player for you.
Yeah.
But you've got one or two coming in. I think Neil's very keen to try and get more minutes for Elisha Sam and Ruben Rodriguez, for instance, who are clearly talented young players that they've picked up. And I think the owners are very keen on identifying and recruiting young talents, aren't they, that can make a difference for County. That's the model that, even clubs much further up the pyramid like Brentford are using pretty successfully. So I think County are keen to do that. But basically, if you can score goals regularly and you're organised and you can retain the body of a squad from one season to the next, if obviously you don't get promoted, that's massive, because a lot of National League clubs turn over a huge amount of their squad every season, and it's kind of start from scratch every year if you don't manage to retain your key players. If you can keep a spine, then it gives you a real chance.
You were at Meadow Lane earlier this season, Stockport game. What did you make of Notts that night? That's probably one of the most complete performances Notts have put in this year, actually.
Yeah, it was excellent. And I think, obviously, I don't see them up close every week, but I think if that's something that Neil has to work on, it's that County are slightly at risk of turning up for the big games and not being the flat track bull in some of the other teams that they possibly could be. There's nothing like, as Torquay have proved again this season, there's nothing like putting a run together to ask serious questions of your competitors. And it's one thing to say that, well, we've got games in hand. Yeah, that never equates to the points on offer, does it really? Never. You can be 4 or 5 games behind and say, well, if we win all those, but that's a big if. And obviously this season particularly, you're going to end up playing into June for sure because we started so late. And it might, heaven knows what the next few weeks will hold. If it does get completed, and fingers crossed it will, it might run even beyond that. We might be playing National League football while the Euros are being played. I don't know, but it's possible. So you could have games to make up with FA Trophy involvement, as County have still got, as have Torquay and so on. You could end up playing really deep into the summer and therefore playing catch-up games, maybe playing 3 or maybe even more games a week at the very end to try and fulfill the fixture list and identify where you're going to finish is a big ask if you haven't got that ability to churn out the wins and the performances. And from the little bits and pieces I've seen, and I'll see a bit more this weekend, County, you've just got to be able to put away the opposition that are there with respect to be beaten. If that isn't unfair on them.
I think that's very fair and very objective. Neil Holmes, from what you have seen so far, Matt, and the big if the season is completed. So you'll upset somebody here. Who do you think will win the league?
Well, listen, obviously...
Can Torquay be caught? That's the question, isn't it?
Well,
can they be
that
caught?
is the question. That is the question. And they can. I'm not saying it's likely because, as I've just said, I think games in hand aren't the same as points on the board. But I think I could make a case for, 2 or 3 teams tucked in behind them. Now, obviously, one of them is Sutton, and Sutton are a very decent team, and they've struggled to find a striker, as we discussed earlier with finding goal scorers. They've relied a bit too much on midfield for goals in the last 2 or 3 seasons, but always been a good team, but lacked a goal scorer. Well, it looks like they found 1 or 2. Albeit on loan, I think in one case, young lad who's scoring goals for them, Ollie Offey. But if they keep their heads and don't run out of steam, Sutton, then they will be not far away. Obviously, I'm going to put County in that bracket as well. And there's probably 1 or 2 others. Stockport clearly have got probably, would I say, the best squad? Certainly one of the best squads in the division, and they've invested to achieve that. They've got very good players. Stockport, saw them on Saturday. They weren't at their best, but they found a way to win a combative, fairly tough game against Yeovil, but they did it. So if they keep doing that, they won't be far away. Obviously, they've just changed managers, so we'll see how that pans out for them. They're going to change playing style over the piece. And there'll be others who think, well, listen, this season of all seasons, why should we give up? But I think Torquay are going to take a bit of catching. I do. They do score goals. They do. They're pretty strong through the middle of the pitch. And Gary's been there, obviously, and done it before with Cheltenham, so he's no mug. You'd rather be in Torquay's position than anybody else's, but it's not over.
Gary Smithhurst, again, funny, you've pulled in a big draw today. Gary Smithhurst. Right, so we got Kel Roberts from National League North, and you probably say he's already done a fair bit, but potentially the most outstanding signing we've made since we've dropped into the National League. A lot of clubs, I think, have been looking at him. He's certainly got that sort of wow factor in the final third of the pitch.
Agreed.
Do you think there are other jewels waiting to be discovered in National League North, National League South? And are there any other, in the main division, any real standout players? You would say he's in my top National League team. Is there anyone that for you that really stands out?
Well, it can be hard to say because obviously I only get snapshots. So where ordinarily you would want, if you were really trying to identify individuals, you'd want to see them over a month, let's say, or certainly 3 or 4 games or more. And probably, if you were scouting seriously, you'd be looking at more than that. You'd try and go a deep dive these days. And we've just mentioned that the Notts County owners are pretty big on the kind of algorithms and the way that they look after their recruitment. Obviously, they found Callum, and he's turned out to be a very good recruit. The other one that springs to mind, who obviously has now been taken by a Football League club, was Sorba Thomas at Boreham Wood. He was an obvious individual talent. I actually don't think their striker, Kabunga Shimanga, is too far behind either. He's a good young prospect striker, definitely knows where the goals are. And then, listen, there are several others I could mention. But if you only get snapshots, you're always a bit unsure as to just how much to really big them up. But there definitely are talents. Obviously, I don't see that much of North and South other than highlights here and there as most people do, other than those that are lucky enough to be able to get to the games when they've been played this season, which has been few and far between. But I saw a bit of Chorley, and they had 1 or 2 players that definitely caught the eye in the FA Cup games that I covered there. I've seen a little bit of Oxford City, again, in FA Cup action. They have 1 or 2 very good individuals. So I know that there's definitely talent at North and South level that National League clubs would certainly, I'm sure, be aware of. They'd be daft not to. And equally, I'm sure Football League clubs, when you look at some of the players that have risen up through the ranks in recent years that I've been covering it, and they've gone up to championship level in 1 or 2 cases, and we all know about the fairy tale of Jamie Vardy. So they don't come along all the time, for sure. And to be honest, there's often a reason why a player that's got a talent or an extreme physique or has a brilliant game, there's often a reason why that isn't happening week in, week out, because they're playing at this level for a reason, aren't they? Whether it's work, family, background, attitude, whatever it might be, there'll be a reason or more that they haven't progressed as much as or an injury. There could be a myriad of reasons, but there's definitely some very, very good individuals and very good teams at National League level. And I think perhaps, dare I say, with the coverage on the telly, people are more and more aware that it's not that much of a gap between, I would say, National League, National, and even the bottom half of League One. I think that's not a big jump.
I mean, cue a question from Lee Brearley. On the spot, Matt, Notts in the Championship in 5 years with the new owners. He's an optimist, is Lee. He's an optimist.
5 years. 5 years is going some. I mean, obviously, we've seen Salford and others, I wouldn't say buy their way because that's on fire, but
Tranmere did well, didn't they? Having got out eventually.
Got to League One, obviously now dropped back to League Two. The problem is that the budgetary jumps aren't initially massive, although they're significant, but the jump from League Two to League One, in order to have a chance in League One to be in the top half and let's say aim for playoffs, that is a big jump. You're going from, I would think, something like 2.5 million or so playing budget to maybe closer to 10 at the top of League One. And then you're jumping again significantly to be anything like competitive in the Championship, significantly. So how are you finding that money? Yes, you can have owners that are ambitious, but unless they're prepared to literally bankroll a club, and that might be the case in Salford and maybe eventually Wrexham's case, where you've got, I suppose you'd call them essentially sugar daddies. But if it's going to be done in terms of the club being self-sufficient, and I don't know what Notts County's owners plan in that regard, if it's going to pay for itself, then 5 years is I think, unrealistic. Yes, you can grow, but for it to work properly and not run up debts that we've seen other clubs be crippled by, you've got to be a bit careful.
Well, I think there was some form of ratification over the weekend, and looking ahead to Wrexham and Notts on Saturday, there was a form of ratification of this takeover. What's your view on that? Because on the face of it, you think, crikey, don't you?
You do, yeah. And I still haven't really worked out what's in it for them, to be honest, or how they've chosen Wrexham. Of course, you hear tittle tattle, but it might be completely untrue. So you don't, unless you were lucky enough to meet them, and maybe they'll come over once in a blue moon. Maybe there'll be the famous helicopter next to the racecourse ground, and out they stroll with the sunglasses on. I'd love to be there for that. It'd be a great day and a great story. I can only assume they've looked around for a club that has potential, obviously, that has something of a kind of story, a Hollywood type story in terms of where it might go. I mean, Wrexham are kind of the only big club in North Wales, aren't they, really? Yeah. So there's not a lot of competition for support for quite a long way. You've got Bangor, in the League of Wales, quite a long way away, and then Chester, the league below, just into England. But really, it's a massive Shrewsbury, I suppose, to the south in the Football League, but it's a massive potential fan base, and of course a story that would captivate a lot of Welsh fans, and obviously the Hollywood factor would probably bring in a lot of part-time lovers of a story as well. So I think it could snowball into something really big, and I guess that's what they want. They may well have an idea of making a fly-on-the-wall film or series. Or I don't know. That's their profession, and I don't know. I know they're actively looking for a chief exec, and dare I say, probably a director of football to be their people on the ground day to day and run it for them, because they're not going to move to Wrexham, I don't think. I doubt it. But listen, it's a great story. It's a great story. We may hear a bit more when we're down there this weekend. And Wrexham clearly want to go places, and I guess that they don't want to hang around. I mean, they've been in the National League for the club their size too long, really, as much as we're delighted to have them from a selfish point of view in terms of the coverage. They'll be desperate to get back to where they feel they belong.
It's a good point you make about Wrexham. I mean, they're probably, alongside Notts, I think they're probably as big a club in the division. You know, I remember when the racecourse ground, and it's still an impressive ground now, used to host Welsh national fixtures. Remember, you'd be still too young, but, you know, Mickey Thomas, the great goal for Wrexham against Arsenal. They were a championship team. They were a championship team, because I remember going there with Notts in '81 when Notts got promoted into the top flight under one of our recent guests, Howard Wilkinson. And you're right, it's a long time there, you know, and good catchment area. They've had some financial issues. Trust took on board. Yeah. They've not actually got that close either, have they, really, for a few years?
Not really. They've nudged into the playoffs once or twice, but not really threatened to bulldoze all the way through. They've also struggled for goals. Again, back to a theme we've talked about on the show. They've always been solid at the back, but struggled really to find the goals that normally propel you over the line. So I think they need to sort that out. I think Dean Keats and the coaching staff there are well aware of that. It's not as easy as it sounds. But you're right, that they're a big club that have been at this level for too long for their sake. And mentioned Stockport. Obviously, remember them as a championship club not that long ago. Yes. Remember covering them for ITV in the championship with Brett Angel and Kevin Francis and those days. And so they've dropped all the way down to National League North before they're now obviously under wealthy new owners ambitiously trying to follow the likes of Salford back up into the Football League. So they'll be keen to not waste time. And obviously we know from whatever level they're allowed in next season, Macclesfield are going to try and re-emerge with my mate Sav and those
and mine,
with deeper pockets and hopefully slightly less outrageous outfits. They're going to come strong as quick as they can. So they'll be fighting from wherever it may be initially. They'll be keen to move on and up as quick as they can. So yeah, there's going to be some clubs knocking about. We just talked about the likes of Torquay and even one or two others that you know, they're not minnows. You know, they're not the kind of the little teams that have never had a taste of Football League life. A lot of them, or several of them, are, you know, serious players in not that distant a past.
And finally, because I know you're working again tonight, I don't know, Premier League, Champions League, I don't know, we'll keep an eye out for you.
Bit of everything this week. The FA Cup Thursday, Wolves, Southampton, then Wrexham, Notts County Saturday, and then Everton, Fulham from Goodison on Sunday, and then Champions League and Europa League is back next week. So yeah, it's busy.
Hey, my lad who produces this, if you need someone to carry bags, okay, I'll send him off, because he's doing nothing at the minute. He's doing this about 2 days a week. Neil Ardley, get on well with Neil?
Yes, very well. Yeah. Very well. Yeah, as I say, obviously it's a bit at arm's length at the moment for obvious and very much good reasons. But if we can, we tend to try and grab a quick chat with him pre-match. And sometimes, if we get the chance, post-match. So only snapshots, but yeah, get on well with him. Always got on well with Neil. Obviously, an old colleague of mine, Robbie Earle, he and Neil were teammates at the old Wimbledon. So I knew of Neil before I knew Neil many years ago. And everybody around him always speaks very highly of him. Professional, now very experienced manager. And I think ambitious, wants to be the guy that resurrects what Notts County should be, really, which is a club going places. And it feels like the jigsaw is being assembled. it won't be as quick as everybody that has followed the team forever, like yourself, wants. But it feels like it's a club going in the right direction.
Matt, thank you very, very much indeed for taking time out of your very, very busy schedule. We're all going to save a tenner or 12 quid on Saturday because we don't need to pay for a stream. We'll be able to listen to your dulcet tones. Who's beside you on Saturday?
Do you know what? I don't know yet. I've not had the nod for who it might be. We're mixing and matching a little bit. I was with Grant Holt last weekend. I know I'm with Chris Hargreaves down at Torquay in a couple of weeks, which is his neck of the woods. So yeah. It might be one of those two, but I suspect it could be Schwan Jalal, who obviously is a former Wrexham player, the goalkeeper. It might be Schwan. We've used Aaron McLean a couple of times this season. So we're keen to try and bring, a few different faces in just to spread the love and give the fans and viewers at home a chance to get different points of view on the team. Sometimes we even let Adam Virgo out the commentary box, but we try and keep that to a minimum.
Thank you very much. Your coverage is excellent. We all enjoy watching it now. So again, thank you very much indeed. And we look forward to getting a close-up of you on Saturday again.
Lovely to have a chat, Paul. Good luck to County, obviously, and speak.
I'm delighted to now be joined by Leigh Curtis. Great to have you back, Leigh. We're a bit worried we might miss you there, but I wondered whether you'd gone to have a haircut, but clearly you haven't.
No, still struggling. I might not get it cut until Notts win promotion.
Oh, dear me. Right, okay. So we've been talking with Matt, and I think one of the most interesting points to come out was that Matt, who obviously has his ear to the ground a little bit, being the face of the National League for BT, he thinks that there is going to be quite a strong vote in favour of the National League National Division continuing, although he certainly wouldn't be anywhere near as confident that North and South would be continuing. In fact, perhaps quite the opposite. The Dover chairman resigned over the weekend, as we all saw. You hearing much more on the grapevine about whether we're going to be carrying on?
Yeah, I'm hearing that there's a fair degree of confidence that the league will continue. And like Matt and others have alluded to, I don't think there's going to be much hope of Conference North and South continuing. I think Chester's statement at the weekend was quite telling. I mean, they're second in Conference North, aren't they? And they've decided they want the league null and void. So it has made me laugh. Some clubs who last season wanted the season scrapped. If you remember when we were all deciding whether the playoffs should go ahead and whether relegation and promotion should still continue, and those clubs who are at the bottom but are now at the top are now saying the league has to continue. So I think, some of the decisions, it's shone a light on, let's say, their own, how can I put it?
Self-interest.
Yes. That's polite, being polite about it.
Yeah. Interesting that the Dover chairman has resigned. There's an argument here for all of the National League board to resign, isn't there? Do you take that resignation as a sign that he's reading the tea leaves with the vote, and that he clearly, from Dover's perspective, who coincidentally are bottom of the National League, or very near the bottom, do you take it that he wants to go one way, the league pushing for another, and he feels those clubs are going to vote to carry on and he's going to lose out?
I think you can read into it, that way, certainly. I think whatever happens, come what may, whether the league continues or not, I think it just underlines that the National League and the board and how it's run needs, huge reform. The whole situation has been handled farcically. There's a really good interview with Liam Watson, the Southport manager, at the weekend when he came out all guns blazing about the National League. And if anybody's not seen it, I'd recommend them to go and watch him and what he said, because I agree wholeheartedly with him on so many points that he raised. I think a lot of clubs are probably a little bit hesitant in terms of taking on loans when they might already be hard up. So I understand why clubs would be hesitant to do that and put themselves under any further financial pressure. But I just think the way that it's been handled has been atrocious. And again, we've spoken on this podcast before many a time about how the National League communicates with its members and with the supporters, because they're very slow. And I think Liam Watson perfectly raised it when he said that Brian Barwick has not made one statement since this whole fiasco has been unfolding. So he's supposed to be the chairman. Where is he? So I do think whether they continue, which looks to be the case, I think that then there does have to be a wide-ranging reform of how the National League handles itself, and because I also feel as well that with the National League becoming almost an extension of League Two with some of the clubs that are down there, it's actually probably the only few leagues where the big clubs, it doesn't actually pay to be one of the bigger clubs in the league. If you look at the Premier League, if you're one of the top six, you effectively run the league, don't you? In the National League, when you've got the likes of Notts County, Chesterfield, Stockport, etc., they often find that because they are the few who are well backed and well funded, they're often outnumbered by the clubs who are part-time, and perhaps don't have the necessary funds to be up there and pushing for a return to the EFL. So, I think there needs to be an even split, I think, on the board in terms of the size of clubs. I'd like to see it whether you get the likes of whether Notts County could be on there, Stockport, Hartlepool, 3, and then maybe have 3 other representatives of clubs that perhaps aren't so well funded. So you could get an even split. But, that's it. I think that's a debate for another day.
Yeah. Okay. So fingers crossed, we're a little bit more confident this week than last week. Plenty of football. Dagenham and Redbridge tomorrow night, weather permitting. Wrexham on Saturday. Neil's had a press conference earlier today. What's coming out of that ahead of the Dagenham game?
Not a lot, really. I think it's just a case of just keeping the form going. I've had a look at the record today, and I think it's 2 defeats out of 14 in all competitions, which is a fantastic record. And obviously, they've got the best defensive record in the league right now. He was able to give players a rest at the weekend, the likes of Wootton, Doyle, Rawlinson, which I thought was great. I didn't obviously see the game, and it sounded like it was a close run encounter, and Notts managed to get themselves over the line in the end, but all you can do is beat what's in front of you. They've managed to do that, and now in the quarterfinals, got themselves a home draw, and now it's all about trying to continue that in the league. I think they've shown with the form they've shown in January and beyond that, I would say, apart from defeats to Hartlepool and Boreham Wood, they've ticked along quite nicely. And if you look at the games in hand that they've got on Torquay now, if they were to win them all, they go point behind the leaders. It's a big ask. It is a big ask. But you have to say, they've done this without a Wes Thomas. They've done it without Callum Roberts. And you have to say that bodes well, because when Callum Roberts comes back, Notts are going to be a better team for it. So, the signs are looking positive. They've just got to keep depositing points in the bank and see where it takes them.
Dagenham already played once, 0-0 down at their place. You were at that game. I'm not sure how many Notts fans are aware, but Darren McMahon, the manager there, he actually had a very short spell, on loan at Notts many moons ago. Quite an articulate guy. Actually did pretty well at Macclesfield in getting them the points that looked to be able to keep them up, but left when they weren't paying the players last season. It was kind of 2 points that got away down at Dagenham when you were down there, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was my first game back from my heart operation. Notts played well that night, but again, it was one of those games where they created numerous chances and couldn't stick them away, and that was it finished goalless, and it was a game they really should have won. Defended really well that night. I can't think of a save that Sam Slocum had to make it on the entire night. I think there was a free kick. I think one of the fullback had a free kick that struck the post. I think it was the nearest they came all night. But I remember some couple of good chances for Carl Wootton. They should have had a penalty that night as well, if you recall.
It was the really blatant penalty that never was, wasn't it?
So, it was when Kyle, I think it was Kyle or Ruben had got dragged down when he was just about to tap into an open net. Clearest penalty you'll see all day, and it never got given. But, it was Notts played really well that night. So you'd hope for more of the same at Meadow Lane on Tuesday night. But these are the games that, Notts need to win. We've seen that they're capable of going and beating the sides in and around them. It's just the ones in the lower half of the table that tend to prove a bit of a nuisance to them sometimes.
Yeah, there was actually a point that Matt Smith earlier, he made exactly the same point. So in terms of tomorrow, or Tuesday, depending when you're listening or watching to this, you would expect a tried and trusted formula of clearly the key players, your Doyles, your Wootons returning, and Neil going with his, if you like, tried and trusted group of players.
Yeah, I would expect. Obviously, Dion Kelly-Evans obviously got rested the weekend, so he'll be back. Richard Brindley obviously came on I think he came on as a substitute. Did he at the weekend?
Yeah, got the penalty.
Yeah, so I think obviously he'll start. Connell, obviously, if he's fit, which I presume he will be, there is no sort of worry about him on that respect. So I'd expect him to come back in. Lacey will probably play alongside him, and it'll be pretty much, I would have thought, the same team near enough that he played the game before. Haven't at the weekend. So Rodriguez will probably start. Baldwin back in. So Wootton got rested at the weekend, so you'd think that that'll have done him the power of good, and whoever starts alongside him, which if you're looking at how Jimmy Knowles has done in recent weeks, he's pushing hard to take that second striker spot.
And Enzio's come back and getting a lot more game time now, isn't he?
Who? Sorry,
Enzio.
Yeah, I mean Enzio's. Listen, I still think fit and fine Enzio's as good as anything in the league. He obviously won a place in the team of the year last season. I think by his own admission, he probably not has scaled those heights quite yet. But in the last month, he's starting to find some form, which is great because I think he gives not such an added dimension, a greater dimension of threat. As he showed in the Solihull Moors game when he created that goal with that mesmerising run, he was absolutely brilliant. And so yeah, I think I like him as a player. I thought it was a good move by Notts to bring him in at the time. It's interesting to note that tactically his position has shifted somewhat from when he first came in, because we all thought he was going to be this touchline hogging winger, but Neil's sort of found a different role for him, coming in off the touchline, playing more in the centre of the pitch, and as we saw against Solihull Moors, that's what he's capable of if you can get the ball to him, and that's what it's all about really, is making sure you give him the ball at every opportunity so he can do his stuff. So the fact that he's coming to form at a key time in the season does bode well.
Notts have brought forward the kickoff time to 6 o'clock on Tuesday. Clearly, they were aware of weather forecasts. I don't know what it's like in the wilds of Lincolnshire where you are.
We've had some snow. We've actually had some snow.
Yeah, we had a bucket load this morning, but it seemed to sort of disappear very, very quickly today. Do we know, presumably Notts and ground staff are all getting it sorted, they would be expecting to get this game on, yeah? And clearly desperate to get it on.
Yes, yeah. I mean, they'll take every precaution necessary. I think it'll obviously be important how the weather is over the next 24 hours. But, I think Notts are desperate to get this game on just to continue the momentum, really. I think that's the most important thing right now is they've had a season where it's, they've had 2 or 3 weeks and then they've probably missed 2 or 3 weeks or had a couple of postponements. But now they're at the stage, and you sense from speaking to Neil that the players in the dressing room are starting to sense that momentum is building. And, when it's like that, you want to play every game and get them ticked off, because there's no better feeling when you're on a winning run. You just want the next game to come around as quickly as possible. So hopefully you can get the game on tomorrow night and Notts can bank another 3 points, because, as we've said, Torquay may well be 10 points clear, I think, of Sutton, I think, is it? So in second place. But if you look at Notts' position, like I said, win those 4 games in hand, they're a point behind them. So, it's still very much all to play for. Notts has played a third of the season now. You know, Torquay are approaching the halfway point. So, as we saw when Barrow before the last season was halted due to the pandemic, you know, they were miles above the rest, weren't they? And then after Christmas, they took a bit of a nosedive, and Notts went there and won. And we all thought at that stage that Notts were in such good form that they were going to make a late surge for the title. So nothing cut and dried yet. So you know, it's all to play for.
FA Trophy, and you mentioned about momentum. It's interesting. Shortly before we were doing the recording, Chesterfield have now pulled out of the trophy. They had a postponed game and a COVID test. Notts have got Oxford City, who we beat 3 years ago, maybe 4.
3-2 in the FA Cup. Yeah, Christian Oxlade-Chamberlain played in that game. Yeah,
that's right. And that led to his acquisition by the club. How importantly do you rate, and how important is the FA Trophy? Do you think, and did Neil give any thoughts on that? Because clearly Notts are going to be playing a lot of games.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think it only gets important when you start seeing the sights of the Wembley Arch, doesn't it? I mean, if you remember back last year, you know, Neil did exactly the same thing as what he's done this season, which is to give players who play in the league a rest, and those players who don't often get a lot of minutes under the belt, they come into the side and they sort of try to carry the flag in the competition, and that's what he's done this year, and it's worked again. We saw the likes of Matty Wolf play on Saturday, Elijah Sam, Jim O'Brien was given a run in the centre of midfield. The new lad Jordan Barnett was obviously given his debut, you know, and they got the win. It'll be interesting to see what team that Neil fields for the quarter final, because again, you're 2 games from Wembley, aren't you? Then, so in terms of the grand scheme of the season and how highly it figures in terms of importance, I think we don't know how it's going to pan out in terms of the pandemic and when fans are going to be allowed in. But I think if there's a cup competition there to be won, and listen, Notts have got a deep enough squad to cope with it, you know, give it a good go. I mean, we almost got there, didn't we, last year? And unfortunately had to play Harrogate in the semi-final, which I felt was a little bit unfair because, you know, Harrogate were about a month or 2 into the season and Notts were just starting their pre-season campaign. So, but listen, if you can get to Wembley and the fans are allowed back in, what a day out, what a reward for the fans that would be. And listen, there's prize money involved as well, isn't there? I think the winners get $7,000 at the next round. So every little bit helps, doesn't it?
Well, probably one of the reasons Hampton and Waterlooville were playing. Although, to be fair to them, they changed their stance a little bit and have said they want to play out the season.
I did see that.
Yeah, they've changed their stance a little. Wrexham on Saturday, and I am old enough to remember Notts playing Wrexham in what would be the second tier of English football, the Championship. In fact, Notts played Wrexham twice in the league when they were promoted into the top flight in 1988-81. Wrexham really have been one of alongside, I guess, Stockport, one of the largest clubs, big fan base, good catchment area, to have been stuck in this division for quite a long time now. And of course, they've got this Hollywood A-lister takeover, which moved a step closer at the weekend. What do you make of all that, and Wrexham and the takeover and Notts going there?
I think the Wrexham story is fantastic. Is obviously Ryan Reynolds. I'm a massive fan of his films. So,
I do.
Yeah, he's brilliant in Deadpool. But listen, it's a little bit of a left field one. I don't think you'd presume any football club would be taken over by an actor. And Rob McKennell, who does, I think, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and it's another good program. Obviously, they're making a documentary out of it. I think they may find it a little bit tougher than. It's easy to throw money at this teams in this league and hope to get out of the league. But I read a piece somewhere over the weekend talking about the National League and teams who have been down in the league. And, it took Luton 5 seasons to get out of the league. People forget that. So it is such a hard league to get out of. So I think as much as Ryan Reynolds and Rob McKennell will give Wrexham plenty of financial backing, as this league has proved time and time again, it cares very little for reputation and history. Very tough and demanding league. you've got to make sure your players are psychologically up for it every single week, and that's hard when you're going to places like Dover and teams that don't have the best facilities and players who are perhaps used to going to League Two stadiums, League One stadiums on a weekly basis. You have that psychological element, and as we've seen, I think that's probably one of the reasons why Accrington Stanley have done so well, because it's an old-fashioned ground. I'm pretty sure that you still get chained in a porter cabin there. So sometimes you're halfway the psychological battles, you've already lost it because you're trying to G the players up for the game. So I think they'll find it difficult, but the money will give them a chance. But listen, two big clubs in this league, two clubs with great history, should be a fascinating encounter. And listen, it should be a football league game, really, shouldn't it? When you take into account all the size of the club and the supporter bases involved. So I think it'll be a good game on the TV as well. So let's just keep our fingers crossed that Notts can keep ticking along.
And of course, Notts fans will be saving pennies on the stream as well, because it's been selected by BT Sport for live. We were talking with Matt Smith earlier, and of course, when Notts were on BT Sport earlier this season against Stockport, probably bearing in mind the opposition, as complete a performance as Notts have put up.
Yeah, really good that night. Obviously, there was that little bit of a concern about the TV hoodoo with Notts, because I couldn't remember when Notts have been on TV several times since I've been here and didn't usually fare too well. But they seem to have broken that duck now. So, but against Stockport, they were brilliant that night, worked so hard for each other. And it was a night where I think, Notts got the goal, got in front, and then they just defended superbly. And I think that's been the theme. And like you've said before on this podcast, if you keep clean sheets, you always give yourself a chance. Some teams can score 2 or 3 goals, but be so defensively weak at the other end that a 2 or 3 goal lead may not actually be safe. But given Notts' record at the back and how well they've defended and the job that Neil's done with the back four, whoever comes in as well, really, it's not been, even when it's been changed, Notts have not looked any weaker for it. So I think it's all about now is keeping that defensive solidity, but just trying to find that clinical edge in front of goal, because that's the only thing I think really that's perhaps stopping this team from really catching fire and hurtling up towards where Torquay are at the top.
Yeah, I think absolutely. Clearly Torquay are not firing on all cylinders. They've had a couple of their more influential players sidelined, haven't they? I guess from their perspective, they got a draw at Notts, which was clearly a massive result for them. I suspect they came here just not to get beat, and I think they got a draw at Sutton as well, didn't they? But they've not won much. But for them to be caught, Notts have to put in a run of not necessarily just unbeaten. They have to put a run of victories, don't they? 5, 6 out of 7. They need to win, like they were doing really, and hauling in Barrow last season. And clearly they're going to be playing 2 games a week, weather permitting, between now and the end of the season, basically.
Yeah, if they can hang in there and put the pressure on, and when Callum Roberts comes back, that could be huge. If they can just keep on the coattails, get Callum Roberts back fit, because I don't think people have probably perhaps appreciated just how much of a bigger loss he's been. He's probably the best player in the National League when he's at it. And if you take it to the extreme example, if you take Mo Salah out of Liverpool or Kevin De Bruyne out of Manchester City for any length of time, you miss those players because they give you so much creatively. That's why they stand out on a weekly basis. So for Notts to have got where they've got with losing their best player, let's be honest, he's their best attacking player. They've done a fantastic job. But if they can just keep in there, knock these points off, and get closer to Torquay, and then if Callum can come back for the final 2 months of the season, just what a confidence booster that would be, and he'll be raring to go given the season he's had. So it looks very promising on that score. They've just got to keep ticking away and make sure they dispatch these teams that are down below them in the table, because as we've seen, they've been to Sutton and won. They've beaten Stockport in the league. They've got a pretty good record against those sides. Beating Altrincham, are obviously in the top 7 as well. Got a draw against Torquay. So those games they don't really give me any concern, because they always seem to turn up for those games. It's just these teams down the bottom, the niggly ones who come and defend and put men behind the ball and make it ugly. And it's those ones really that Notts need to just sort of make sure they, the bankers, they look bankers on paper, but as you and I both know, nothing's ever a given, is it? I've no divine right to win any game, but Notts have just got to try and find a way.
Find a way indeed. I think certainly for me, probably the most encouraging news is the increasing likelihood that we will be able to continue, because I think we were certainly very worried about that this time last week in the podcast. Look, none of us know for certain, but it does appear to be a little more encouraging. And all you can ask for ultimately is to play the games, and we will finish ultimately, as will everybody else, where we and they deserve to be. In terms of timeline, are we still not expecting a firm decision for potentially up to the best part of 3 weeks?
I think so. It just depends on how quickly everybody registers, sends the votes back, isn't it? So I think we'll probably get a good indication within the next 10 to 14 days, really, of how the land lies. A lot of teams have already come out. I noticed a lot of teams haven't said publicly which way they're voting. So it's just play it by ear. I mean, I think, as we've seen, the top teams in the National League, those who are involved in the playoffs, realise how much of a carrot promotion to the Football League is worth. There's no reason it's worth £1 million, isn't it? So why, it's worth a lot of money. So why would you give up that if you can continue for 2 or 3 months to the end of the season? So it's all there to play for. I expect the league to carry on. It's then just a case of making sure what happens with the COVID testing then, because I noticed the National League have brought in mandatory lateral testing now, haven't they? Which perhaps should have been brought in a bit earlier, but at least they've made that step in making sure that players are getting tested twice. I think it's twice a week, isn't it? So I think that's definitely a good move to make sure that we aren't sort of pegged back by loads of postponements again.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Smith made the point that has taken away one of the objections that clubs can put forward. Whether they believe it or not is another matter, but that has taken away. There is still a financial debate, but from a health perspective now, that decision takes away that health concern.
Yeah, absolutely, and it needed to, really, because it got to the stage where teams were cancelling games on the basis that a player had shown symptoms and wasn't a positive test, that's contributed as to why the season, if you look, there's still a great disparity between some teams that have played 17, 16 games and others have played 21, 22. So anything that can help avoid that, because I felt at times it did get a little bit too easy for games to be called off. Because
I agree with you.
People were showing, just because people showed signs of having COVID. I mean, I get it's safety first, but surely you would have a test to prove once and for all whether that was the case. And I also thought there should be a threshold by which games couldn't be postponed. So if you had 2 players who had a COVID, you couldn't call the game off. If it was 5 or 6, okay, you'd understand why the game would be postponed on the back of that. But it's all about getting the season completed. The National League has finally addressed that, and hopefully now we can just crack on and watch how this thrilling promotion race unfolds, because I still think there's going to be a lot of twists and turns to come.
Couldn't agree more, and I just hope we do get to see all of these twists and turns. Leigh, thank you very much indeed. And will you be at the game, or are you on Forest duty tomorrow?
No, I'm at the game tomorrow night. So
very good.
I'm there on there at Meadow Lane. So no, my luck, I'll be a jinx. Turn up, they'll get beat. So that's how it just seems to follow me around. So, but no, fingers crossed for 3 points.